You play video games to play them, right? And the most engaging form of gameplay is combat, so why would you want to talk your way out of it when you're robbing yourself of gameplay? That's the wholly emotionless and analytical take you could have on this topic, but there's more to it than that. Dialogue trees, depending on how you view them, can be like puzzles. You go into a conversation expecting or wanting a specific result, and depending on how well you read the situation, your goal is achieved. If you want to avoid conflict, then talking your way out of a fight is almost an even greater achievement than winning the fight. After all, you've won hundreds of fights at this point in the game, and this would just be another one. Meanwhile, the opportunity to peacefully resolve conflict is only reserved for major battles in a game. So, mastering the dialogue tree is almost the same feeling as solving a complex puzzle, as you use emotional intelligence and problem-solving skills to resolve the situation. Of course, this feeling of satisfaction is limited by the writer's skill. If you've just picked the calm down option, and then the character did so, you wouldn't feel like you accomplished anything. You just hit a button and you won. But if the writer makes you try to understand the characters and speak to them on their level, then getting out of a battle is an amazing sensation. But let's go back to the analytical side of the argument. Games are here for gameplay, and combat is usually the crowning jewel of most games. So by talking to someone, you're making the choice of prioritizing the story rather than experiencing the game. Of course, missing 1 or 2 fights out of 100 isn't a massive deal, but the writers only allow you to talk your way out of fights with plot-significant characters. Since these are unique encounters, the gameplay is also unique, and you're essentially skipping a boss fight. Now, since pacifism through dialogue is typically an RPG trope, this isn't too big a deal, as boss fights in these games usually aren't as intricate or unique as they are in action or platforming games. But then again, you can talk your way out of fighting Gaunt or O'Dim, and that's just an insane thing to do. However, a more common consequence of spearing bosses in RPGs is missing out on delicious loot, and bosses always have unique loot. This is a tricky dilemma, as the player isn't going to know if the boss has good gear before they decide to kill them and steal their treasure. But when I was min-maxing my builds in Baldur's Gate 3, I killed some enemies I could have let live purely because I wanted their loot. And this may be morbid of me to say, but not every character deserves to live, and games that let you talk your way out of battle could have a less satisfying ending than what the plot might call for at that moment. For example, I only spared Flowey because I wanted the pacifist ending, when I believe that he does deserve to die for the crimes he's committed. So if you're trying to achieve a good ending where every character is spared, you could end up creating a strange and tonally mismatched narrative. While it's your story and you get to decide how everything goes, there are certainly ways the devs don't intend you to experience their story on initial playthroughs. This goes the other way as well. I can't count how many times I've seen a dialogue option to start attacking the person I'm talking to and killing them for no logical reason, but the game still allows me to do so. The narrative certainly doesn't expect you to kill them in this moment, and playing like a maniac can also create a poor story. Another mechanical aspect to consider is your character's level. Skipping out on too many major battles can leave your character underpowered for upcoming mandatory fights. Some RPGs rectify this by supplementing the XP anyway if you talk your way out of it, but then isn't fighting the character just a waste of time if the fight can be resolved in a few seconds and I'll get the same reward? There's also the method by which you convince your opponents to stand down. You don't always get them to calm down or see things from your perspective. Sometimes you have to intimidate or threaten characters. While this is still morally better than butchering them, some players might feel more comfortable taking down an evil orc rather than threatening to kill their families. It's still objectively a worse thing to do, but it makes the player feel better about themselves because they didn't have to do anything objectionable. It all comes down to emotional intelligence and feelings about certain characters. We all perceive these games differently, and I'm sure there are people who think Flowey is a tragic character and deserves to live because he was once an innocent person. Maybe you think stories are more important than gameplay, and you're willing to sacrifice a few possibly engaging fights to get a more satisfying narrative. But I'm always wondering how much fun killing that character would have been. While there's always the save and reload feature, I would be just as curious to see how the story reshapes itself around an unexpected murder and the far-reaching consequences of each kill. Or maybe I'm just overthinking it, like I do all my niche opinions on this channel. I'll be back in 2 days. If you enjoyed this video, then here's one about the worst things you can do in Baldur's Gate 3.